So I am arguing today that Christianity is inherently scientific, but before we can have any fruitful discussion on this matter, we need to examine the scope of my claim. So if we don't do this, we'll just be talking past each other. I'll probably end up getting a headache from this conversation, so let me go ahead and propose a few conventions. The claim is not that Christianity is a laboratory science. Christianity is not created from controlled experiments on physical systems. Genesis did not predict the Big Bang, and we were not transmuted from dust into flesh by some sort of full metal alchemist magic. I am not claiming that all Christians reason scientifically either. No discipline is defined by the behavior of a single one of its practitioners, and the existence of bad scientists does not falsify science. Likewise, the existence of anti intellectual Christians does not falsify Christianity's historical methodological structure. So, what is my claim? The historic rational exploration of Christian theology has always been inherently scientific. The claim is that Christianity, properly understood, exhibits the core methodological features that philosophy of science identifies as integral to scientific rationality. So, looking at these definitions, we are going to look at Thomas Kuhn, Martin Kurd, and Karl Popper for some guidelines as to what defines a science. So, Kuhn, in the Structure of Scientific Revolutions, decisively rejects the idea that science advances through simple accumulation of facts or mechanical application of method. Instead, Thomas Kuhn argues that science proceeds through paradigms, shared frameworks of interpretation. Normal science is a problem solving endeavor within a paradigm. And then within the paradigm, there will be anomalies that occur, data that strains the existing frameworks. This will call for crisis and revision, reinterpretation, or replacement of the paradigms. Under this framework, Christianity functions in a recognizably scientific way. It operates within shared paradigms, doctrinal frameworks that have refined over time. It engages in theology informed by the premier science of the time, interpretation, commentary, application. It encounters anomalies, failed expectations, ethical tensions, historical discoveries, and it undergoes reinterpretation without abandoning its core commitments. As soon as Christianity came into existence, it reinterpreted the messianic expectations from Second Temple Judaism. Christianity has always reinterpreted its framework when the previous paradigm was insufficient to explain contemporary anomalies. Next, we're going to look at Karl Popper. Popper describes how science distinguishes itself normatively. In works such as The Logic of Scientific Discovery, science progresses through bold conjectures, exposure to potential falsification, and elimination of error through criticism. A theory is scientific if it makes claims that could, in principle, be shown false, allows revisions when refuted, and does not insulate itself from critique. At first glance, religion may appear unfalsifiable, but historically, Christianity has exposed itself to risk in several ways by making historical claims, eschatological claims, and ethical claims. And note, one may want to argue that some central axioms of Christianity are not up for falsifiability, to which I will also counter that this is the same for any scientific discipline. In physics, hypotheses are made concerning natural phenomena, but these hypotheses also rely on propositions which are tautological by nature. The knowledge of mathematics, for example, is tautological, but physics relies on mathematical models to prove its claims. Martin Kurd, in the Contemporary Philosophy of Science, emphasizes that science is best understood as a normative epistemic practice, not a rigid method. Science is characterized by public accountability, reason-giving practices, expert community evaluation, openness to revision, and resistance to coercion. Through each of these methodological criteria, Christianity is recognizably scientific in method, though not in exact science. Christianity revises its interpretations in response to internal tension and external knowledge without abandoning its foundational axioms. This mirrors Thomas Kuhn's paradigm refinement and Kurdian normative epistemic practice. Christian theology is hermeneutical by necessity. Meaning is not self-evident but argued for. This is a hallmark of rational inquiry. Doctrinal claims are subject to logical analysis, philosophical critique, and ethical evaluation. Rejection of coercion. Both Kuhn and Kurd emphasize that rational inquiry collapses under coercion. Whenever Christianity has become coercive, we've always seen paradigm shifts within popular Christian movements. The insistence that belief cannot be forced is a precondition for epistemic integrity and a core tenet of true Christian belief. And convergence toward truth over time, science does not converge by eliminating disagreement instantly, but by long term refinement under shared norms. Christianity's historical development shows precisely this pattern in doctrine, ethics, and theology. And then I will. Do I still have a little bit of time?
It is 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
2 minutes and 50 seconds. Then I will address one potential objection from the get go. Before I continue, I will address a common objection that I know is going to come up, and that is Christianity's historical reinterpretation of the messianic expectations, delayed eschatology, and ethical revisions amount to moving the goalposts. This objection appears to be intuitive, but it presupposes that the theist holds to divine command theory. So, under divine command theory, moral and theological truth is fixed by explicit divine decree. Revelation is propositional, unmediated, and complete, and human interpretation is at best secondary and at worst corrupting. Under this model, refinement must look like goalpost shifting because the truth has already been fully specified, and any reinterpretation signals failure or dishonesty. If Christianity claimed to operate this way, this objection would be devastating. However, Christianity is not grounded in divine command theory. Historically and methodologically, Christianity does not function under divine command theory. Scripture is an interpretive mapping onto the Word of God and not the Word of God itself. The majority of Christian denominations also do not hold to divine command theory. See Thomistic Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and mainline Protestantism, such as Lutheranism, Methodism, or Anglicanism. Theology is interpretive in this view from apostolic tradition. Scripture is contextual and not unmediated. Truth is encountered through reality, reason, and history, and ethical understanding develops through communal discernment. On this view, revelation is not a data dump, but a long running interpretive process. And moving the goalpost is a silly way to constrain any discipline anyway. Absolutely no mature science operates in a way that prevents room for growth. And if
A
you
minute?
argue that I'll finish this really fast. And if you argue that Christianity isn't true, or else it would have no room for growth, then I suppose we should give up on every scientific pursuit ever because they all still have room for growth. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a heads up, we can hear you breathing through your microphone. You may want to move it away from your mouth. So you might
Is
want
this better?
to maybe in the middle of those two locations.
Like that?
Yeah, and if we can hear you breathing more, we'll just let you know and you can push it a little bit further. But I think that'll work.
Gotcha.
And then thank you so much for the opening statement. And then let me know when you're ready, Eric, and I'll start your 8 minutes.
You can just start them right now.
Perfect.
So I didn't prepare like a written opening statement because I just had no idea where this would go exactly. But I took notes, Zach, during your opening statement, so I'll try to go through those a little bit. But what I see, I have discussed this topic before. I think that there's kind of a deep logical tension between science and Christianity, which is that science is grounded on naturalism, and it holds this axiom that nature behaves in consistent and predictable ways, and follows natural causes. And that's sufficient to do whatever kind of science you want. Christianity, if you want to try to make it scientific in some sense, you have to add this other axiom that, yes, God created the world in order to have that property, but that doesn't actually do anything to help you. If you only adopted the first thing, you'd be able to accomplish and learn anything in science that another person adopting the extra axiom that yes, and God created it would be able to do. So it doesn't produce any kind of advantage in any sort of way. But also, if Christianity is true, then that means that supernaturalism and magic and whatever else are actual forces in reality. And so we actually can't take the regularity of nature for granted at all. And if you read the Bible, and if you understand the perspectives, especially of people writing, the Old Testament, nature was not viewed as, and this isn't a uniquely Judeo-Christian thing either. This is what ancient Greek philosophers that were polytheistic or pagan or whatever thought too. They thought that nature was the continuous intervention of God or sets of gods or some sorts of supernatural forces out there. Over time, they developed deterministic and naturalistic beliefs about certain aspects of the world, but they were often mediated or caused or grounded in either a god, many gods, or some other kinds of supernatural forces. But anyways, if all that's true, then we can't really take the regularity of nature for granted, because it could be superseded at any point. And especially in Christianity, it's necessary to believe this, because you have to believe that miracles have happened in the past. Quite a lot of Christians think that miracles still happen today. So why would we pursue any kind of science that, especially like medical science, when we could just pray, for example? There has been a lot of ground that has been, given to naturalism over hundreds of years of renegotiating and reinterpreting the role of natural philosophy and religion. Augustine famously had the handmaiden. He thought that science and natural philosophy should be the handmaiden of scripture or Christianity or religion or whatever. He thought, yes, they were useful, but ultimately there are certain matters of faith that will always take precedent, and we can try to use naturalism to try and understand God's works and things like that. But ultimately, the faith has sort of the final say in quite a lot of things. There's more I could say, but I think it would be more productive to just save it for open discussion. I guess some questions I have to sort of put them out there would be, I still haven't exactly heard what would make Christianity inherently scientific, although I will go over what Zach said in his opening here as much as I can. I don't really think that any religion can be inherently scientific, so I'm not picking on Christianity in particular, but I don't, let's not have a discussion on other religions. But I would be curious to hear, if Christianity can be scientific, then I don't see how any other religion can't also be. So I am curious as to if Zach thinks there's something uniquely specific about Christianity that makes it scientific over any other religion. How much time do I have?
3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Okay, tons of time. So it seemed like Zach was saying, I tried to type as fast as I could, that the study of Christianity has always mimicked not necessarily the scientific method, but the way we have gone about doing science, like the enterprise of science itself. So, for example, you referenced Kuhn, and I'm aware of Kuhn's work, but I haven't read any of his books. But Kuhn rejects a sort of gradualistic. I'm thinking of terms in evolution. It's kind of funny. He rejects sort of the gradualism of science over a kind of punctuated equilibrium, which is we're stuck in a paradigm for a while, and then an incredible new discovery that changes almost everything about the way we look at science or view things comes in, and then that's the new paradigm for a while. And apparently Christianity has mirrored this as Christianity has gone through some paradigms. I didn't really hear examples of this, though. The examples I can think of are actually quite traumatic and contentious events, like the Great Schisms, like Martin Luther nailing his 87 treaties, or however many it was. This has caused a huge amount of consternation and strife and disagreement in Christianity. And it essentially produces factions of millions of people that are now caught on either side of a contradiction. And I don't actually really see how that mirrors science all that much, because when general relativity came out, there were some scientists that were reluctant to believe it, but once it was experimentally verified, then the scientists knew and understood it. We didn't have, the mainstream science isn't made of half the group that are still geocentrists and half the group that are now the heliocentrists. Whereas Christianity, as it has evolved through the process of inquiry and people interpreting scripture to mean what it means and changing the fundamental beliefs while not abandoning the core beliefs in Jesus' divinity or whatever, That has done exactly that. That's created these huge camps that are caught in contradictory positions, essentially. So I don't see that as really a very close analog to science. Zach said Christianity reinterprets its framework when new information overturns old paradigms. I think I kind of already said that. Brought up Popper and falsificationism. I never heard this perspective before, but I actually kind of appreciate it. It's kind of cool. Christianity has made itself subject to falsifiable claims. Um, Zach's the first person I've ever heard say that. But again, I didn't hear what the
15 seconds.
specifics were. The resurrection, I guess, could be an example. But when it comes to interpretations on Christology, like, is the filioque true? That actually isn't falsifiable, at least not in an empirical sort of sense. So we'll leave it there. Pythagoras did not invent the Pythagorean theorem. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb. George Washington Carver didn't invent peanut butter. Surprised? There are hundreds of more misconceptions you can learn the truth about in my book, Facts That Aren't True. Get your own signed copy or audiobook today. Link in the description.
Cool. I guess I'll respond to a couple of your questions. So obviously, I'm born and raised in America, so the religion I'm most familiar with, what I've spent most of my life being knowledgeable of, is Christianity. I have studied Islam a little bit in college, and so I would point out that within Islam there are two main camps that I know of, at least Sunni Islam. There's, I think it's the Ijtihad scholarship and the Taqlid scholarship. And so the differences between those two is basically Taqlid says, we already got everything right. We're going to stick to that. It's kind of like fundamentalism for Islam, but fundamentalism is specifically a Christian term. So actually, the right term is Taqlid. The Ijtihad is the idea that the mujtahids, the Muslim scholars, should still go about and go through this process of verification and attempt to codify their material in a research-oriented way of peer review and these conciliary means. And so I would say that's recognizably scientific. And again, not an exact science. I think it's still more of a humanity, but it does operate in a way that is recognizably scientific.
So this is something I thought of when you were giving your opening. I just don't think that this sounds very scientific. It sounds more political to me. So like, that the Constitution's been amended a whole bunch of times, right?
Right, yeah.
So we've gone back and reinterpreted the Constitution or come up with novel ideas that we think are necessary. And we've added that, like we've changed our documents without fundamentally changing what like the United States as a country is. So in the tradition of Christianity, having reinterpreted scripture in light of new information that's been known, or choosing to when they changed the Nicene Creed because they just thought that, hey, this makes the most sense. I view that more as a political thing, because I don't think when we amend the Constitution that's like science. I don't think it's quasi-scientific at all. I think it's pragmatic, and you could say you can make the argument that like they're contributing to some sort of like philosophy or epistemology, but I don't think that it's really actually scientific. I do see how you're finding an analog in Islam. I grant that. That's fine. But anyways.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with this. And I think the fundamental difference between like amendments to the Constitution and theory refinements within Christianity, and again, I'm not saying that Christianity is an exact science. I still think it's more of a humanity, but it operates in a scientific way. I think that the political realities, like the Constitution, those are people who are elected into office, who go on campaigns within the Christian doctrine, Christian theology. These are all experts who have studied their documents extensively If anything, it'd be closer to like a philosophical peer review, like a philosophical amendment process than a legal or political one, if that makes sense.
Well, that's what the Supreme Court does. The Supreme Court's job is to interpret the Constitution. So,
Right.
novel legal challenges have been brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has to be asked: does this thing violate the Fourth Amendment or the 14th Amendment, so on and so forth? And they have to deliberate and decide that without changing anything. So, some amendments are added because people think that, like, there's this debate. Some people think we don't need amendments beyond the first 10. And then you talk to these people and you're like, are you insane? You think slavery should be brought back? And they say, no. The original Constitution already outlawed slavery. And I was like, well, then why did we need an amendment? So there are people that think their interpretation of that document is it says this thing. And then there are other people who say, no, that this document does not say that thing. And so there's extra stuff. I think this is way more analogous to the way, theologians or whatever look back at the Bible and reinterpret it. And I don't really see it as a science, because I understand your points about how, like, structurally, culturally, philosophically, the way we view science has changed over time due to like paradigm shifts or whatever. But if you're actually subjecting something to science, then there has to be some sort of, science is very methodological, and I don't really see a method here.
Right. So I think we can look back, like the Nicene Creed, when they canonized the books that would eventually become the anthology that we know as the Bible. I think that the process that they went about this process of scholarship, of study of the Bible, there was, I will admit, there was a element of politicization from the imperial Roman decrees at the given by Constantine. But let's see. I forgot where I was going with this. Give me 1 second. You had just said.
Sure. I was just saying I view the process as being more like the political reinterpretive process, which is like pragmatic and philosophical, rather than like any kind of actual scientific process, because science is very methodological. Like it has fairly rigid steps, and I just don't see that being mimicked in the course of how Christianity has really changed over time.
Gotcha. All right. So I'm actually a naturalist as well. So let me ask you a question. Given that we have these sort of ethical systems, do you think that the way that we go about studying ethics is an inherently scientific one, or that we should go about studying ethics is should be inherently scientific?
Do I think studying ethics is inherently scientific?
Yep.
I don't think it is without science, but I don't exactly think it's inherently scientific. Although I could probably convince myself that it is, because if ethics, this is going to sound a little bit weird, but if ethics is the study of humans studying human behavior, and we're organisms, we're animals, right? Then that just kind of is science. But I do also leave open the idea that, well, when you're trying to structure a society and when you're doing politics and things like that, and that's not exactly a science, because in order to create a functional society, we have to adopt and believe in things that literally aren't true, like the value of money or like the existence of human rights, for example. But I think if you were going to try to do a study and look at, like, look, if humans adopt these kinds of ethics, these are the kinds of results that you get. I mean, that really just is scientific. But the value structures that you put in place, that are going to be like the normative goal, like, well, yeah, this is what we were looking for, though, that part of it's not scientific, not really.
So if you think that the study of ethics could at least be scientific, and I would argue that the study of science ethics should be scientific. Um, would you grant that as religions evolved, like as they first came into existence, they were sort of these proto ethical theories? And so, at least in some way, they were attempting to describe the ethical realities of the world they existed in. And so, maybe if they're not using the like modern statistical or linear
Right.
algebra that we're used to now, at least in some way, shape, or form, they would, even if you don't grant that they're true, are attempting to describe ethical theory by conciliar means, expert peer review, and paradigm and the scientific theory of the time. That's the other thing is that Christianity, when it first came into existence, was very heavily influenced by Greek scholarship and engaged with Aristotelian and Platonic logic. And so, even if you uh, don't agree that Aristotle or Plato are science. I wouldn't say so. I would say Aristotle has some very scientific claims, but I would call him, if anything, a proto scientist. I wouldn't really say there were scientists until at least Roger Bacon or uh, Occam.
Oh, Ibn al-Haytham was absolutely a scientist. He's way before those guys.
Oh, was he?
And
I
real
haven't read
fast,
Bacon.
point of moderation, there are a couple quick
Sure.
things. So Oceanus said, Zach Z, I listened to your opening arguments, but here's the issue. You're so generous with the label of science. It would also apply to Hinduism, Scientology, the Roman Empire, dog grooming, etc. Thank you so much for the super chat. That's greatly appreciated. Feel free to respond to that one if you want. It was more of a comment, but I felt that was directly related to the topic, so that would be fine.
Yeah, so Hinduism, I know nothing about Hinduism. I'm a terrible person to ask. Scientology, as far as I understand, it's kind of like uh, uh, like a fictional story of aliens at some level. I'm not
Yeah.
going to get into that mess. I
It's
don't know enough about it.
yeah,
The
it's
Roman Empire, uh, that kind of goes more to the political parallel that we talked about with uh, the Constitution. And they do call it political science, so maybe there's something there. Dog grooming, if there was expert peer review for dog grooming, then sure, it's a science. Uh, if
And
you
then there
like,
was one more question, Robin. How is claims of resurrection based on anonymous claims over 2,000 years ago in line with the rigorousness of the scientific method? Thank you, Robin. Greatly appreciated. Great question.
okay.
so
Can I want to address what you were saying before we forget what you were saying before the super chats. But I do have a quick question real quick. Do you think that belief in Christianity is scientific, or do you think that Christianity as a practiced religion just has like scientific elements to it as it progresses and changes over time?
yeah, so the belief in Christianity is going to be more individual, moral, ethical. It's going to deal with how you want to deal with existence. I think there's like a philosophical and epistemic aspect to it.
Sure.
Uh,
I,
for
I
this,
agree. It's more of
for,
it's more of a matter of faith and
mhm.
ethics and personal choice. Yeah.
For the specific debate, like um, barring my personal beliefs of the truth value of Christian claims, I'm just arguing that the methodologies that they have historically used are uh, very scientific or proto-scientific in their
Okay.
in the ways they went about exploring claims.
Okay. So now that we kind of have that on the table, so I don't want to make the discussion about, so you think that I could use the scientific method to reach the conclusion that it is possible for somebody to resurrect. So we're not having that kind of debate, which I'm glad, because I don't think that's a winnable debate for your sake. But anyways, so you're going back to, you asked me if I think studying ethics is scientific. So I think that doing or rationalizing your ethics is not scientific, but I think studying ethics can be scientific. So you're asking me questions about, well, you think like ancient, you think religion started as a way of doing ethics and things like this. So yeah, that's part of it. I am a big believer that religions kind of started, and you can. I'm reading. You'd really like this book. I'm almost done with it. It's called The Beginnings of Western Science by David Lindbergh. You'd really like it. It's really good. But it talks about how science was developed, and I'll get into that later. But early on with religion, yeah, I think that people sought explanations for the world because we're rational creatures and we are obsessed with the idea of cause and effect in the world. But nature hides most of its information from us. Thankfully, we have science to uncover that. But early on, why did bad thing happen? Because we failed to do X, Y, or Z. Then that's a very prototypical religious type belief. And you see it all over the world and all throughout history. But also, why do things exist? Why are things the way they are? Religion has something to say about that as well. And early science, or people attempting to do at least natural philosophy, had ideas like that too. And they got most of it catastrophically wrong, like Aristotle's arguments about why motion is the way it is and why things fall to the ground and the structure of the cosmos. I mean, he was wrong about basically everything, but of course he was. He didn't know anything. Nobody else did. But his attempts were very proto-scientific. Anyways, so getting back to religion, trying to think of what my train of thought there was. So like in religious texts, they come up with justifications for like taboos and things like that, and cleanliness rituals. And yeah, I probably think people probably did make observations about if we do these sorts of things, these are the kinds of outcomes. Okay, and so they grounded that, they rationalized that in God. So it's like, well, God says don't eat pork because, people sometimes get really sick from it. So it's a taboo food or whatever. People probably were intimately aware that incest is extremely unhealthy. So religions all around the world made that taboo as well. So it's not exactly the same thing as studying ethics, but yeah, I think religions probably started off as for like ethical and moral groundings, or at least justifications for things, because they already believed and knew do blank, don't do blank, and then they grounded it in God or whatever. And then also, where did the world come from? Well, there has to be a prime mover, for example, and that's God and all these other things. So I rambled for quite a bit there, so you can respond.
Yeah, and I would note that while Aristotle was not a scientist, he does have, and I'm not trying to defend his natural philosophy or any thing that he claimed to describe the physical world, because obviously that's indefensible. But some of his principles regarding methodologies and how we go about studying the world, I have a quote here that says, if the consequences are the same, it is always better to assume the more limited antecedent, since in things of nature, the limited as being better is sure to be found wherever possible rather than the unlimited. And this is basically saying, like, oh, if you fly to Seattle and it rains and then you fly back home, the more logical, rational assumption is to say that it rained while you were in Seattle and not that it always rains in Seattle. And that is a very methodologically and an inherently scientific claim. So my argument is that the rational logical faculties that early Christians were working with, interfacing with the Aristotelian and Platonic disciplines, they did their best to make it scientific with the methods they had at the time. Can Zach and Peterson come up with a definition?
Yes, there is a great question here from Jamie Nolan Official. Can Zach and Peterson come up with a definition of what science is, something that they both agree on? That's a great central point to focus on, actually.
For sure. Uh, I guess I would ask, in your opinion, does science have to be uh, inductive or can it also be deductive? So, for example, is math a science or is math a different form of knowledge?
I don't really consider math to be a type of science. I think math is just like a pure rationalism,
Okay.
essentially. I could also just say math is just math. That's just all it is. It's this unique thing. The concept of studying integers and understanding change over time and manipulation of quantities. That's just uniquely what math is. My definition of science is basically a methodological system of study to explain the natural world. That's pretty much what I always say science is.
Okay. Uh, would you include? I'm assuming you wouldn't include philosophy within that because philosophy is methodological, but I don't think anyone is very comfortable with the idea of like philosophy or metaphysics qualifying as science.
Yeah, that's why I said to explain the natural world.
The natural world. Okay, that's
Yeah,
specifically.
so
Gotcha.
this doesn't include like all the stuff we were talking about, like with politics earlier. Yeah, I think what the Supreme Court and what Congress and whatever does is a methodological uh, study of, but they're looking at something completely different. So for science, it's just of the natural world.
Thank you
So
for the super chat. And then we'll go back to this one real fast. This is just a fast one. But Robin earlier was asking about how claims of a resurrection based on anonymous claims over 2,000 years ago fall in line with the scientific method.
sure.
And that's a great
So
question. Thank you.
so if somebody came around and said, and granted, the resurrection itself, right? Whether or not it happened, but if somebody goes around and they start making claims of the resurrection, then there's this sort of process whereby the witnesses are examined and the data is going to be um, up for review within other individuals, and they're going to say, "Why do you believe this?" So there's this sort of falsifiability element to it. Uh, the unfortunate aspect is that uh, the historical records that we have today are not anywhere near the level of certainty that one might want to prove a claim such as this regarding the resurrection. Ancient histories are inherently mythological. So, right, there are things that are described within the Bible that are parables and they're sort of symbolic. And I know people in the chat are going to say, "Oh, it's symbolic." That's where they always go. But the truth of the matter is that the type of histories that we have from that era are inextricably related to mythology. But that doesn't mean the entire story is fake. So, like, I'm a math major. I've studied math history. Uh, Pythagoras, foundational in our understanding of mathematics that we have today, they said he was a sorcerer and he had magic powers. Uh, do I necessarily think that the magic power side of that is accurate? Probably not. Do I think Pythagoras was a real person? Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's any reason not to think that Pythagoras or Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, uh, Diophantus, Apollonius, Euclid, any of these ancient figures who don't have very strong historical records. I don't think there's any reason to think that those weren't actual real people.
Let's go backwards one super chat. So, do you agree with my definition of science? Because I think the audience wants us to make sure that we're both talking about the same thing while we do this.
Yes, that is important.
Yeah, so the deals with the methodological, deals with the natural world in a methodological way was the definition.
Yeah, a methodological system of study to explain the natural world.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. So
Uh,
we can agree that that's the operation we're working with. So my question to you would be, you talk about Christianity, uses the it's scientific in the sense that Christianity engages in inquiry into its own history and its own interpretations and things like that. I think you mentioned like early church fathers before we started going into those super chats. So my question to you would be, what is the methodological process that these early church fathers went about uh, for interpreting and understanding Christianity?
Yeah, I can pull up a few examples that I prepared. Um, so we have the earliest paradigm shift within Christianity, and we don't have a lot of historical records as to how this methodologically was engaged within the experts of the time. But Christianity inherently is a progressive and a religion built off a paradigm shift. So you started with Second Temple Judaism, and the dominant messianic paradigm was that there's going to be a warrior king ancestor of David who liberated Rome from imperial domination. He would restore Israel's sovereignty, and there would be a literal, physical, historical triumph over the enemies of the Israelites. And these expectations were epically failed by the messiahship of Jesus of Nazareth because he was executed by the Romans. Israel remained occupied, and there was no political restoration. So, from a Kuhnian standpoint, this represents a severe data anomaly. You have this guy who's claiming that he's the Messiah, but obviously he's not meeting the wickets that they thought were indicative of the Messiah. And so there was this reinterpretation of the null hypothesis where they said the Messiah was a suffering servant and that the kingdom was non political, this sort of transhistorical entity, and victory was cosmic, ethical, and not a military victory. And so Christianity at its earliest onset was revisionist. And this continued immediately because in the New Testament, you have the problem of the parousia, where they talk about how in this lifetime you will see the second kingdom come, but that eschatological expectation is shifted because they don't see the second coming within the same generation.
Right.
So there's this Johannine shift of the eschatology where they say the kingdom is understood in part in present, but future in its fullness. And so this continues on. You have Augustine and the demystification of political power, where Rome fell, or there was a departure from normalcy. And so they, uh, in the city of God and city of man, there's an explicit denial that political power validates theological truth. And this was a commonly held belief up until that point, the idea that your uh, power on earth or your status validated your position. It reframed Christianity as a ethical and sort of metaphysical endeavor rather than an imperial. And now, from this point, you had eventually Thomas Aquinas come forth. You had the Thomistic tradition, where you had principles like truth cannot contradict truth, reason and revelation are mutually constraining, claims must be subjected to objection, authority does not bypass rational evaluation, objections must be stronger than the response. Sorry, objections are stated stronger than their responses, conclusions are provisional and reason, and counter arguments are preserved, not erased. Aquinas explicitly argued that theology would collapse if it resisted rational scrutiny. And so I think what you get here is where the Christianity that people are more familiar with, that they interact with on a daily basis, is not the historical methodological structure of Christianity, but rather it's this modern political caricature of religion meant to push the power of a few elite billionaires. The deeper irony, in my opinion, is that if Christianity did not revise its interpretations, then it would be unlike any other rational tradition out there. You know, if uh, if we said that Christianity, say as scientists or as people who engage in science, we said that Christianity cannot revise its interpretations or else that's just proving that it's wrong, then implicitly we're validating the most harmful form of Christianity that tends to try to stick to its grassroots and uh, uh, harm marginalized communities that we see today. I don't think that's Christian. That's not a progressive
Um, okay,
movement.
I'm gonna have to jump in here because it's been a while.
Yep.
So, do you know what Karl Popper's basic kind of definition of pseudoscience is?
No, I haven't read Karl Popper. I just did a little bit of research on him for this debate.
Sure, I haven't read any of his books either. I'm just kind of aware of him. So, to make it really simple, what pseudoscience is a process that is post hoc, where instead of running your idea through the scientific method or testing or whatever and subjecting it to falsifiability, you look at the data afterwards and do this post hoc reinterpretation. So when I hear you talk about Christianity's gone through these paradigm shifts and it's been reinterpreted and all this other stuff, you're describing a process that's post hoc. This generation did pass, even though Jesus said it wouldn't. Okay, now we have to reinterpret it. The whole messianic thing, the kingdom will be here on earth and will be liberated from the Roman Empire. Well, that didn't happen. So we're going to claim that the kingdom actually is in heaven, not on earth. That's post hoc. We waited until the events unfolded, and then to try to preserve the original belief, we just reinterpreted it. So science can't be infinitely flexible like that. That's exactly what unfalsifiability looks like. When you just inexorably post hoc reinterpret things. So I think there's kind of a pretty significant philosophical tension between the philosophy of science, at least as falsificationism is understood, and Christianity here. But I mean, if it's all just post hoc reinterpretation, then I mean, I don't think that's really anybody's idea of a process that's scientific. I do have something else, but go ahead and respond to that, and then maybe we'll have to get some super chats in here too.
So my argument would be that Christianity operates more like mathematics, where the fundamental tenets are taken as these definitions or these tautologies, and the core principles of Christianity are deduced rationally. It's not an inductive method where you go from the specific experiments and then you build up. It's you come up with the general principles, and then you come to specific elements from that point. But when you get to the specific elements,
but I don't even agree with that, because the reason the Constantine convened the Nicene Council was because there was so much disagreement. There were adoptionists and there were Arians, like it was the Arian controversy, Arius of wherever he was from. So you had all these, like Jesus was divine, but he wasn't the same thing as God. He was divine and was God. No, he was just a man. Some people thought he was a freaking alien and shit like that. So it didn't really actually even start from any kind of like first principles or anything like that. That was, I mean, the beliefs existed for right from the get-go. And then about three centuries later, then, a standardized version of it was adopted. But yeah, like after hundreds of years, I mean, that's what, 75 years longer than the founding of America. And think of how long ago that was. Imagine if we still didn't have a constitution or anything like that. And then 75 years from now we do, and then people argue that's always what America was. It's like, well, no, I don't think you could. The historical record does not show that.
So I guess I'm having a little bit of trouble here, though, because We agreed on this definition where science was a methodological system to discover the natural world,
Hmm.
and political systems and ethical systems, we both agreed, are emergent from uh, natural properties of human psychology and development. And so, if anyone is trying to study ethics in a methodologically nuanced or experimental way, even if it's in post hoc, you can't necessarily, especially for ethics, you can't just say, hey, I'm going to subject this entire population to XYZ conditions and see what happens. Something so large scale like that, you have to react. You have to be more reactionary. But given that um, these ethical and political systems arise from natural, emergent psychological or neurological substrates, aren't they inherently natural?
Yeah, but you're mixing up the religion itself with studying the religion. If I'm a sociologist or an anthropologist or something like that, and I want to go study whatever group of people on the planet and try to come to an understanding of how did they develop their norms, customs, religions, or whatever, I am doing a type of science when I do that, but that's separate from what are the beliefs of that actual religion. So I think you're mixing things up here. Like
So
we
you would
we
say
can
this.
we can look on the outside at the process of how Christianity developed and where they got their ideas from, and we can study it in a kind of anthropological scientific sense and make sense of why they did that. But the but I just I feel like that's not the discussion that I signed up for, although I didn't really know what I was signing up for exactly. I feel like that kind of violates, is Christianity um scientific?
So you would say that the study of
Because Christianity
Christianity
is the
as an
beliefs that are what the Christian religion is. Um the debate isn't, did the development of Christianity follow a scientific like path or something like that.
so you would say the study of Christianity as an anthology is a science, but Christianity itself is not a science. If I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it kind of sounds like
Yeah,
that's what you.
like political science isn't a political party. It's something completely different.
So, but as looking at Christianity as the um, exploration of ethics before uh, the like real concept, before ethical theory had really propagated throughout the modern world, with like deontology and the works of Kant, you don't think that that would qualify as a science too, even if it's not. Sorry, I shouldn't say it
No,
qualifies
not
as a
really.
science.
I think there's I think you can understand it in a naturalistic sense. But I wouldn't call it like I don't think they were early pioneers of ethics or psychology or anything like that. People that were inventing any religion in particular.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, I feel like because it is the uh, natural exploration of ethics, methodologically grounded in uh, Aristotelian and Platonic logical structures, which rationale, like as far as sciences goes, not a science by today's standards, but by the standards of the Christians in the third century, that would have been the premier scientific rational tools of the time. Given that those questions, those ethical questions, were being explored using those rational methodological methods, I feel that even if you disagree about the truth of Christianity or the existence of God, you can still see how the methods that they employed were scientific and how they were attempting to analyze truth and morality from a standpoint of first principles, where they said, well, the first principle, let's say God exists, and then we'll say, uh, God is good, and then try and understand what that means going from those principles.
Yeah, I don't agree. So like for example, we know today that fasting is good for your health. Fasting is also kind of a big thing in Christianity. Probably not as much today as it was back then. I can believe that Christians are, well, anybody, you don't have to be a Christian. I can believe that ancient people, although they were very ignorant on health, I mean, there were people that were trying, like Galen and all kinds of other people, but holy shit, everything they wrote down was wrong. But I can believe that ancient people understood that if you fast periodically, it actually is good for your health. And now, but what they would do is they didn't understand why that is. And what they would do is they would ground it in God. They would say like, well, we have these specific like fasting days, and gluttony is a sin, and God doesn't like it when you're wasteful or whatever, and maybe sacrifices are part of that. Like I actually do have this kind of weird, it's a little bit of an out there theory, but I kind of thought like, you know what, maybe there's so many sacrifices in the Old Testament because it was incredibly difficult to, grow crops and things like that most of the time. So maybe they sacrificed to just kind of emphasize this is very difficult, and it forces you to put so much of your effort into, the thing that supports your civilization. And then they just rationalized it with, yeah, God demands us to do that. That's total speculation on my part for that. I just kind of wanted to get that out there. But anyways, I can understand that they knew that fasting was like healthy for you, but not why. And there's other things like cleanliness rituals, like washing your hands and whatever else, or like being kind to other people. Like Jesus said a lot. Yeah, I can believe that they understood that leads to good outcomes, but they didn't have an actual rigorous understanding of why. And then when you ground it in faith or whatever, then I just don't think that that's scientific at all.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I feel like you're making that jump. You're calling it like early, like Aristotle. I think that Aristotle basically was an early scientist, but he never did experiments, and he didn't really do the scientific method. However, I think he is still an early scientist because he sought explanations in the natural world derived from like natural causation. And if science is a methodological system of study of the natural world, then that just is what that is. I mean, the first version of science was obviously primitive and crappy, but it still fits. It technically fits the definition. But with religion here, that added element, I think, is where we jump to something completely different that just isn't science. And I feel like that's probably the crux of my disagreement about you on the thesis here.
So it's something about the faith element, I guess, that you would say obfuscates or gets in the way of the uh, methodologies or the
Yeah,
tradition being
yeah, because these
scientific.
people are trying to know or do or understand something about their lives, and they're a part of nature, and whatever is affecting them, we could say it's natural or whatever, but they don't seek an explanation in those principles. They seek an explanation and a rationalization and a justification and a cause from something completely outside nature.
Uh, yeah, I don't want to get too deep into epistemology and sort of like these questions of knowing and belief and what counts as knowing, what counts as faith. Uh, but would you say that faith is required at some level? There's a faith required for science too. Like people have to have faith in the scientific method, or faith that, like the idea that science brings about good or makes our world a better place, or that the development of new technologies make the world
Mhm.
a better place. I would say that's the case. I think that is
Well, yeah,
true.
you're talking about motivation there. which is different. I thought what you were saying. I don't mix faith with axioms and presuppositions. Science obviously has axioms and presuppositions, like nature operates according to fixed laws that are basically immutable, right? You adopt that belief axiomatically or whatever before you engage in science. But I still wouldn't call that faith, because the scientific method obviously works. We have reasons for justifying that the scientific method or the scientific attitude or whatever produces results, and so that's not faith. And I again I do distinguish between faith and axioms. I don't think they're the same thing.
So yeah, I would agree. I'd say that every time that we have come to a reasonably that whenever we have come up with a scientific or naturalist explanation, for example, for things that may have once been explained by purely religious reasons, right? If we at one point people thought storms were evidence that God was angry or whatever, and then we obviously learned through studying the environment that the weather phenomenon can predict thunderstorms, for example. But I still think that there is a place for faith, right? You can't like we know that the scientific method is good. We have seen the evidence over the years, so we can have trust in the method. But how, like, what about the specific scientists? What about of this time? We have to have faith in the people that are in their positions, faith in um, individuals knowing that they will do their job and do the right thing. Uh, and ethical theories themselves, I feel like, are somewhat, there's a level of uncertainty there. So maybe faith rests in this area of uncertainty where, yeah, like I'm
But what
not,
does that have to do with Christianity?
well, my point is that I feel like faith is not a, um, does not disbar something from from scientific uh, if the faith is what inspires you to um, undergo a study, then I don't think that disvalidates the study. So if I have faith that by
Sure.
studying physics I can make the world a better place, that doesn't disvalidate my study of physics, for example.
Yeah, that's fine. There are people. I still don't 100% know what this has to do exactly with Christianity. I mean, there are people that argue that, early scientists. Well, I mean, like Bacon, Copernicus, Galileo, the other Bacon. Although Bacon wasn't really a scientist. Neither was Francis Bacon, actually. But they said that they pursued these things in order to uncover God's creation, for example. And so I would say that, yeah, maybe there's a faith element that inspired them. I think I don't have a problem with that. Like, I think it's like, so what are we talking about though? Like, can faith and science coexist? Yeah, I think they can, but I think you can do science without the faith as well. In fact, I think you're probably more likely to get it right, because early, like with evolution and stuff like that, the early scientists studying biology, the ones that were the most religious, like Cuvier and Linnaeus and Owen and Leeuwenhoek, they were more wrong about what they believed in, because they couldn't abandon their faith about special creation and the Bible. Whereas, I mean, Darwin and others, but then like we can look to other sciences like physics or whatever. The atheists made really unprecedented gains in all those things. So
I think I can debate with you on that a little bit, because I feel like it was a lot of religious people have contributed very greatly to the sciences. And this isn't
yes,
obviously
what I
not.
was trying to say is that the faith doesn't actually add anything. The only argument I think you can really make is, well, yeah, but Galileo was inspired to do science because he had such faith and wanted to understand God. It's like, okay, that is, um, that's a cute story, but it's totally untestable. And it's also just bias pumping. You know, when you, I don't know if you watch sports, but do you watch sports?
I used to in high school. I've been so busy since
Okay.
then.
And well, as a nuclear scientist, yeah, I can believe that. But uh, so you wouldn't know this, but I'll just tell you because I watch a lot of sports. Every single time they interview a player after a big game, the player says, "Oh man, just I give all the glory to God, and I just put my trust in Him, and blah blah blah." And it's like, okay, so by this rationale, does God actually have favorite sports teams? No. What these people are doing is they're pumping their own biases into their own experience, which is a very natural thing to do. So yeah, with these early scientists who all happened to be Christian because basically everybody was a Christian, I don't think you can actually make a very compelling argument that the faith was actually a prime mover in any of it.
I do find it compelling, and this is part of the reason why I'm unconvinced into deconstructing or moving towards atheism, because it seems like so many prolific, and it's not just like early modern scientists. As late as the 20th century, the father of quantum mechanics, Heisenberg, was a Lutheran. The father of electromagnetism, Maxwell, was a Christian. You have Planck, who was a Christian. You have even Einstein wasn't a Christian, believed in Spinoza's God. That's a whole nother thing. We can talk about that if you want to. But I
Which
feel
I
like that,
reject Spinoza's God as being God
yeah,
because it's just
uh,
nature. So
yeah, you pretty much define God into existence, right? Um, but I feel like there is something to be said there. And even still, throughout the 20th, all the way up to the 21st century, I think it's something like 60 to 70% of uh, Nobel Prize winners in physics were religious people. And so
that could
that is less.
Yeah, that could be. I actually do have polling on this. So there was this giant survey. I could get you the link sometime. I think I still have it. They did this giant study where um, they interviewed eminent scientists. So those are scientists that are very well known and highly published in their field. So it's not like a general survey of all scientists in a particular field. They picked like the big guns for this. Um, and when they asked them, like, do you believe in God? 85% of them don't, and only 10% do. But the vast majority of them did grow up believing in God or, like, at least in religious households. But science isn't slowing down at all. Like, our progress in science is ever accelerating. While the most preeminent scientists, more and more, are becoming more and more and more irreligious. So I don't use this. I don't use this data to argue we're better off without religion for the sake of science or anything like that. But I think it massively undermines the idea that like belief in God or Christianity somehow uh, is healthy or or that we would be better off with Christianity in the sciences, I guess.
Interesting. Well, let's get back to the original discussion, I suppose. Uh,
Is it okay if I ask you a question? Because I've had one written down for a while.
yeah.
So, in the spirit of, I thought of this after talking about uh, post hoc rationalization, Popper, and pseudoscience and all that. Um, what would prove Christianity false? Because, I mean, the guy Christianity it's named for, he was wrong about his own second coming, and even that didn't falsify Christianity, which is pretty crazy when the guy it's named after got something wrong. But in your estimation, what would prove Christianity false?
I guess I would need you to be a little bit more specific as to what you mean by prove. Like, do you mean what would prove? There are aspects of Christianity that I think have been proven false, like by the development of uh, radiocarbon dating, specifically, or lead uranium dating. We can reliably prove creationism false. And so I think there's a strong argument to be made that there should be a revision of canon. And so, like creation accounts maybe should not be included anymore in the canon. And Christian authorities have the right to do so. You can continue this progressive tradition of, hey, we have new data, we should revise it and move on. Um, but I would need a little bit more specification as to, and this isn't like a new, as early as St. Augustine. St. Augustine said, like, yeah, Genesis is probably symbolic, it's probably not a literal creation story. The idea that like it's a literal creation story, the earth is flat, like all of that, that comes with modern American fundamentalism and sort of this politicized attempt to stomp on socialism essentially by conservative uh, funding of American churches. That's a whole other conspiracy theory, but
Yeah, I mean that's true, but I mean, like, if you read Josephus, he was a very highly educated first century Jewish person, and he believed that Genesis was history. He didn't see any reason to think that anything in Genesis or Exodus was metaphorical or anything like that. It's like I get Augustine's like his different take on it, but I only say that to be like, well, Augustine was actually in the minority. The people that, like Josephus, for example, very, very highly educated, and who's going to understand what the intention of the text was? A very ancient and of a very ancient Jewish text, an ancient, highly educated Jewish man, or Augustine, or these 19th century Christians who were butthurt about evolution and all this other stuff. I would go with Josephus, and yeah, he says that. Or sorry, I mixed up the 19th century thing. I mean the modern people that go around saying like, no, it was never even meant to be literal. It's like, well, yeah, actually,
yeah,
I think it definitely was.
Yeah, and that's not my argument. You have the young Earth creationists, you have the Flurf movement, and then you have some people who say like, oh, Genesis is actually symbolic, and like when they say 7 days, it was like actually each day was like a billion years or whatever you want to say.
That's definitely not what it means.
I propose maybe a slightly non-mainline or like different idea, and that's that we have data to show that creation account is not a valid creation account. Maybe we have two options. We could either drop it from the canon entirely. That's something that you can do, or you can say that, hey, this is still canonized, but you have to explicitly understand the genre. This is what people use to understand the creation of the time and how they understood ethics at the time, but it's not a reflection of what our best scientific theory says today. And I think that with keeping in line with the progressive Christian tradition of revision, I think that is probably something that should be done. And so I would be interested to hear what you have to say about that, and if that's consistent with like a methodology that accepts truth and gets rid of what or revises our interpretation of what is accurate, and if even if it's not an exact science, if that is scientific in nature.
Yeah, I mean, I hear this a lot, and what essentially I'm hearing is, look, I mean, it goes back to the post hoc thing again. That's fine. Like, if people, as a science communicator and a science advocate, if Christians are going to go around endlessly interpreting scripture so that, at least in their minds, their beliefs sound less foolish because they need to get in line with, what science reveals about the world or whatever, then I'm happy for that. That's totally fine. But it's a little bit awkward because what you're doing is you're you're grounding truth in what nature reveals to us. Scripture doesn't even take precedent over truth anymore, except in certain places where no matter what, you can't ever cede ground. Like we can scientifically prove that the Eucharist and the wine do not turn into blood or flesh. Well, but we still have to believe that. So what we're going to do is say it's all about the essences and the accidents or whatever. So it literally is a miracle, even though literally nothing about it changed. But it still takes on the qualities and the characteristics of flesh and blood, even though nothing about it physically changed. It's like, well, okay, that's great. But like with all the other science that they adopt, it's like cool. But yeah, you're just sort of, I don't know. When science or whatever determines the truth value or the correct interpretation, at least of your scripture, then I think you're kind of in a weird place. And I still don't really see how that really marries science and Christianity or makes Christianity scientific, because again, that's all just post hoc, which I think kind of violates the spirit of what science is.
I don't.
All right. Pause. That's the initial hour. So I'm going to read through a couple super chats and then we'll start the next hour. Oceana says, Zach, as you know, in the hard sciences such as physics, chain of custody of evidence experiments must be documented. Christianity handwaves that in lieu of faith. Science embraces doubt.
Yeah, I agree that science embraces.
Oh, I'll put it back up. Sorry.
Yes, I agree. Science embraces skepticism. That's a fundamental aspect of skeptical rationalism. There does seem to be a difficulty in the way experiments are conducted, right? I can go to my gamma spectrometer in my lab, and then I can place a radioisotopic source in it. I can count it, and then I can document it, and like I have all those records here. If my subject of study is like the nature of what it means to be a good person across time and history, and starting from such a low tech time and space, you're obviously not going to have the same quality of evidence. So I don't argue that at all, but I don't think that that discredits the work itself.
Gotcha. And then he also says Christianity has never been the exploration of ethics. Those ethics it had were borrowed. Christianity has been the imposition of authority. Thank you again, Oceanus. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah, there was a significant dialogue between the Greek ethics, like the Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics, and Judaism, and that's how we get a lot of the Christian theory that we have today. So I don't disagree that some of the ethics were borrowed. I wouldn't say that all of them are borrowed, because a lot of them are inherently Jewish in origin.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
And then this is the last one, then we'll get back into this. Oceana says, science deals with the frontiers that are knowledge of the natural world. Beyond the evolution cope as Christianity catches up, there have been no frontiers breached or crossed by Christianity. Thank you, Oceanus. Greatly appreciated. Any comment, or would you like to get back into this?
Can you pull that up one more time?
Oh, yep. And while he's reading that, if you're enjoying the show, please slam that like and subscribe button. Drop a super chat with a question for our wonderful guests, or a comment or something like that. Get a taco membership while you're here. Become a not idiot. We've got another hour in the debate. I think we're at 75 likes. I'm double checking there real fast.
Got to get naked.
We're at 70 likes. Do either of y'all need to use the restroom, or are y'all ready for the next hour?
I'm fine.
Cool. All right. That dead stare there you gave us, Eric, tells me you're good to go. So I'm going to begin the second hour. This is a little bit more flexible. I mean, keep it around the main topic, but you can be a little bit more flexible with it. So if you need to veer off the course a little bit, feel free to. But you got another hour.
Yeah, I will point out what Dan Steely said because I don't want any misconception to be had. I am not a nuclear scientist. I do appreciate the compliment, though. Big PP, technologist is the better term.
Oh, my bad.
The people with the higher degrees don't like it if you call yourself a scientist with that one.
That might have been my fault. I thought you were a nuclear scientist. I think I told him nuclear scientist. I apologize.
Oh, you're all good.
That last super chat. Have you ever read any Yuval Noah Harari books?
No, never heard of him. Her.
Oh, his books are great. You should. You'd probably really like *Sapiens*. It's a good book. But in that book, he says something that's really interesting. He says, if we were called upon to try to name the single greatest discovery in the history of science, this would be an almost impossible task because of how difficult it would be to find the single greatest achievement discovery in the history of science. And if we did the exact same thing with religion, it would also be nearly impossible because there are no discoveries in the history of religion, he basically says. So I think that's kind of what that super chat was saying. I don't think Christianity's ever made any discoveries or anything like that.
Well, I certainly think that there's wisdom that we can understand that, like you were pointing out, how like the things that they decided, like the way Second Temple Jews would were only allowed to have a certain diet, and this was like to prevent them from getting sick. My personal belief is that a lot of the sexual purity ethics come from the same line of reasoning, right? If back in the day you don't have any sort of STDs, you can't even clean yourself reliably. If you see someone being sexually promiscuous and they get like syphilis, then you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's not something that you should do. So I think that there are natural, I guess, records or notes about natural reality that was made by these religious people. And though maybe the source of that illness like was misattributed, we could talk about that if you wanted to. I still think that it was a valuable piece of information to record and bring forth. And there is also some like pretty interesting and prolific pieces of information recorded by like Jesus in the New Testament is recorded as saying, to those who have not, everything will be taken. To those who have, everything will be given. And that's like a very apt economic description of, obviously, this is not the intent of the passage. This isn't what he was trying to do. But we can see that that's a very apt criticism of capitalist systems where people who are in power have this cyclic growth of their power and their wealth, whereas the people who are impoverished do not enjoy the same luxury.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like ran out of ideas a while ago about what we should talk about actually. But no, going back to what you were saying before that, I guess I've kind of already, I don't know, I've kind of already made the point. I'm not sure what else really to add, but yeah, the idea that religious people saw patterns in the world and thought that, yeah, there must be something behind this, and they grounded it in religion. Yeah, I think they had goofy reasons for doing that, and I don't think it was scientific. But I think that that's something that comes natural to people. If we like raised if we took a bunch of babies and put them on an island and observe them with cameras but didn't actually interfere with their development or anything like that, and watch them for thousands of years, what kind of society would they develop? Would they inevitably start with religious type beliefs and then move more toward a natural philosophical kind of belief system and then later invent science? It's kind of tempting to think maybe that they would, because of what comes natural to humans and what's does not come natural and is much more difficult. Science is. It is that. So yeah, that's possible.
So it almost seems like you are willing to say that in the line to the creation of science, you like there is like the period of religious thought and then a period of theo-philosophical thought, and then science comes after that. Uh,
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
that
don't think
mean
that's inevitable necessarily. The problem is science was really only it was developed in a fairly narrow part of the world. Um, and like we could have maybe seen it developed and advanced in other parts of the world. I mean, like the astrological accomplishments of the Maya, for example, are just extraordinary. But unfortunately, a lot of those cultures kind of collapsed or disappeared entirely, or uh, the Westerners came over and everybody died of smallpox. So we'll just never know. But yeah, I
can I
mean,
ask you,
yeah, go ahead.
why do you think that is? This isn't. I don't want this to come off as like Eurocentrist or anything like that. And I acknowledge, like, you have Al-Khwarizmi, the advancements of algebra. You have a lot of advancements in Eastern Asia, like Liu Hui. He was basically the Euclid of China. You have scientific or proto-scientific advancements across the world. But what do you think? I almost feel like there is some sort of inextricable relationship between the development of science in the West and the Christianity of the West. And maybe that might be biased because obviously I'm a Christian. I'm debating for Christianity.
Yeah.
But don't you think it's interesting that even there was a lot of science going on everywhere? You had science in India, Asia,
Yeah, I don't
Japan.
know anything about the development of Eastern science. I mean, China invented everything and we borrowed it from them: gunpowder, scissors, paper, the contour plow, block type, um, uh, presses for like a proto printing press, umbrellas, wheelbarrows, just so many things. Yeah, I actually don't really know anything about the history of science in China. I don't know if they independently developed a kind of scientific method. Like Ibn al-Haytham and Roger Bacon and Francis Bacon, I don't know. I don't know if Francis or Roger Bacon read Ibn al-Haytham. I suspect that they probably did, but they kind of built on each other. Was there an
Yeah.
independent development of that in the East? I wish I knew. I just don't know. But to get to your point about Christianity, in the West being linked to science, um, so I I did a lot of digging into this, and the answers are kind of interesting. They don't bode all that great for Christianity, but they also don't bode well for the edgelord anti-theist atheist who thinks that every medieval peasant thought the Earth was flat. Uh,
Yeah.
that's just absolutely not true. Again, you'd probably really like that book, "The Beginnings of Western Science," that I am currently reading, almost done with. But anyways,
Who is that one by? I wrote it down earlier, but I didn't get the
shit, I don't
author.
remember. "The Beginnings of Western Science." I always forget the guy's name. David Lindbergh is
Oh,
his name.
Lynn. I think I have heard of him actually, Lindbergh.
So, anyways, um, yeah, what the contributions of Christianity with science, I would say Christianity kind of like it was an accident. It was a happy accident that Christianity kind of helped with the progress of science. So its contributions were, um, they did preserve a fairly decent number of manuscripts. I would argue they did way more harm than good because there was a huge amount of censorship that went on. There are all kinds of treatises like against Christianity and that are like pro natural um what the hell, why can't I think of the term, naturalism or whatever, philosophical naturalism or whatever, that were censored and erased. Some of them, the only reason we even know they existed because there were Christians that wrote commentaries on them. So they essentially copied them verbatim just to shit on them. And that's the only reason we even know they exist. So we have no idea how much that they chose selectively to not copy. But they did copy some things like Ptolemy. Ptolemy was really important because his astrological or astronomical studies were really important for timekeeping, and Christians were obsessed with that because they wanted to make sure that they were celebrating their holidays at the correct times. And Christianity certainly also helped preserve, not just preserve, but extend and expand literacy rates, because Christians were like, look, we need people to know this book, and so we're going to, like with all the copying of the holy texts, also a lot of Aristotle and some Galen and, like I said, Ptolemy and Plato and others. Those things were copied, so they could have otherwise been lost. Again, they were pretty selectively censorious, but I'll take it. That's for the first kind of 500 years, and then there actually is a period of decline, that medieval period, and then in the Islamic world by far was more important because what ended up happening basically in like the 12 and 1300s was the sort of rediscovery, maybe is a little bit too loaded of a term, but sort of the rediscovery of the classics, right? And that was mostly possible because of how much copying in the Arabic world occurred, because for those years when in Christian Europe, for whatever reason, there was sort of the decline, the Arabic world copied vastly more, and then they were engaged in a lot of early proto-science like Ibn al-Haytham and al-Farghani and the guy you mentioned earlier, I forgot his name.
Al-Khwarizmi, the father of algebra.
Al-Khwarizmi, yeah, him. They copied vastly more stuff, and then luckily that Islamic to Latin translations were created, and then people in, again, like the 12 and the 1300s, maybe even the 1100s a little bit in Europe, started doing those Latin translations as well, and then that helped usher in kind of the Renaissance and arguably like the scientific revolution and stuff like that. Another thing was the churches were they started the university, the idea of universities that comes from the church. But that's kind of because they had a monopoly on political power and money, and a few other things. So it was sort of the only avenue that would have been able to go through. Again, happy that it did, but I don't really see an intrinsic scientific.
So you're kind of saying it's like an economic link or political more than a like Christianity. You don't think that the
Christianity deliberately
inspires the learning?
Yeah, I don't think Christianity really inspired it. There was some deliberate stuff like the preservation of the astronomy. Christianity had a nested interest in that because of keeping track of calendars and dates is important for Christianity, but it wasn't done for like in the spirit of science. It just so happened to be kind of a happy accident, and then people started to. That was an actual inspiration where people started saying, well, can we get better at this? Can we develop better timekeeping systems and more accurate astronomies in order to, in their view, that strengthened the faith and justified it. So but there aren't very many examples of that. There are all kinds of examples where they kind of got in the way, like the banning of studying human corpses, like cadavers. Uh, that got in the way of doing scientific research. Certain people were really allowed to get an education. So it's like, yeah, I mean, for every Francis Bacon or Galileo or whoever, you prevented a bunch of Marie Curies, for example.
Yeah.
And yeah, expelling the
I've
Jews constantly all throughout European history as well was not helpful at all. So
Yeah, and I have made videos on how the like Marie Curie specifically. I've made videos on how she was disbarred from the French Academy of Sciences, and they didn't even let her present her own Nobel Prize lecture because she was a woman.
uh,
Uh, totally, totally messed up. And I do agree that that was uh, uh, part of the authoritarian sort of uh, patriarchy system of control that was set up at the time. But I do still like acknowledge if it was just like one devout Christian scientist, then I'd be like, okay, that's just an anomalous data point. But the fact that you have like Newton, Gauss, Euler, Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Bacon, Descartes, the list, and I I understand that they were immersed in a Christian society, right? So you're going to have a tendency, like if I'm going to guess where someone in the world might be an atheist, I would guess in a Western country because that's just generally where the majority of atheists live. Or if I'm going to guess where a Christian lives, I'm going to guess
well,
a Western country.
you left out China, but but yeah,
Kind of a Western country now with their socialism, but I that's a whole other debate
that's an
as well.
interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting take. So, um, I think your logic. Well, let me just give you an example. I'm sure you don't think this, but do you think that
I'm naked now, by the way. I'm totally naked. Sorry for the interruption. Just a point of moderation. 75 likes. I am totally naked. Point of
Yeah.
moderation. Sorry.
do you think that white men, for example, have inherently more scientific brains?
Yeah, absolutely not. That's
No. Okay. Yeah. You don't think that. However, it is true that if we look at the historical record, those are almost exclusively the figures involved. But that's because of that's because of certain undesigned coincidences and the way the systems were set up, like women not being, allowed to pursue an education, for example. Like that's one of the reasons. So with all these, with like the Christian, like the correlation, so there's an enormously strong correlation between, white dudes and science, but we understand that that doesn't mean inherently that being a white dude means that you have a more scientific brain or something like that. And yes, there is this very strong correlation between the Western development of science being accomplished almost exclusively by people who happened to be Christian, and the church kind of having a pretty important role in it, at least from the terms of like providing funding and in some cases like an explicit motivation for doing that. But again, that doesn't mean that there's anything inherent in Christianity that causes or leads to scientific progress or anything like that.
So part of the reason I would agree with you so heavily is from I've taken a couple classes in developmental psychology, and so like you see when they do experiments, there's been a few instances of feral humans where they uh, reintroduce them to society after being these children being feral for a few years. They try to redomesticate them, and basically in every example, like they aren't able to progress beyond like a very low level education. And so the nurture part of their growth is like hugely important. And there is like some mix between nature and nurture, but uh, it seems like the nurture part is more predominant in the development of like scientific inquiry. And so, given that all of those scientists, uh, the predominantly white scientists, were immersed in Christian uh, cultures, I'm more inclined to believe that their scientism was a byproduct of their Christian culture than their white identity. Actually, I think their white identity has nothing to do with it. And I think it's all a product of the methodological structure of inquiry that they were raised in. And now, like I said, I grant that there are
Yeah, I mean, the
100%.
reason I don't think their whiteness has anything to do with it, even though there's a extremely positive correlation, is the same reason I don't think their Christianity really has anything to do with it. I don't actually see a causal pathway between there, and the rationalizations that people give, like, oh, but they were inspired to do it because they believed in a creator and blah blah blah. That's again the athlete being interviewed after the big game saying God did this. It's like, so God made the ball go in the hoop. I don't think so. I think you did that for intrinsic reasons that you're not even aware of. And then when you're asked to explain why this is, then people just fall back on their biases and how they were raised and things like that. You can't come up with better reasons than that, because I don't think people really think about their beliefs very often.
Yeah, so I don't think causality is right either. I'd have to like agree with a sort of Humean analysis where there's a conjunction of events and we associate them. But I do think that there is an inextricable relationship to the religiosity of the scientists and the science that they developed, at least um, in some part. And that may be partially because they lived in a very religious society, and so like we don't really have an avenue to see what it would be like if they were just all like if they were all atheists. If we had a society like that, we could just compare and contrast, and it'd be a super easy data analysis. And it's like everybody should be Christian or everybody should be atheist, just dependent on that data.
Yeah,
Uh,
we can't exactly do that. We can kind of do that today. I mean, I brought it. I mean, for all the famous, Christian scientists that you brought up, again, because like virtually everybody in the West was Christian. Well, in like in the 20th century and the 19th century, we had Darwin and Einstein and Feynman and Hawking and Bohr and Schrodinger and Oppenheimer and Pauling and Penrose. So these guys didn't believe in God, or if they believed in a God, it was a very kooky version of God or whatever. And yet they were able to do incredible science. Now you can make the argument that it's like, well, yeah, but they were standing on the shoulders of giants, which were the Christian scientists before. It's like, okay, but did that have anything to do with Christianity? Because those early Christian scientists were standing on the shoulders of Islamic scholars and scientists and philosophers and theologians and pagan ones before that. I mean, we were just very clearly doing science before Christianity even existed in the world.
Right. And I did grant that, like I said, there are some systems of Islam that I would say are inherently methodologically scientific. And probably the people from the Ijtihad discipline would make the argument that I'm making here that Islam, properly understood, is inherently scientific in the revisionist or the process of interpreting the I think it's called the ahadith, which are the scriptures and the saying of their people. And I'd be willing to, I don't know that much about pagan Hellenism and what their methodologies look like, but just by
Well,
the
I mean, they
nature in
didn't do the scientific method, but I mean, they were able to, I can't remember if it was Aristarchus or which one, but, they were able to calculate, one of them was able to calculate the distance to the moon with almost
Aristosthenes, I think, right?
Now, Eratosthenes measured the circumference of the Earth.
Oh yeah, you're right.
But they were able to do just incredible things, with extraordinary accuracy, without like doing the scientific method. Without having exactly a scientific. So I can't remember what you said that made me bring this up, but you said something about I'm not sure what kind of. Yeah, I think you're just saying you didn't really know what they were doing, but yeah, they actually did accomplish some incredible feats of knowledge.
Yeah, I was just saying that I think that there are methodological institutions of other religions that qualify as inherently scientific, or at least proto-scientific in some sense.
Mhm.
And from there, the argument becomes like, well, is there a proper way to understand um, religion within a scientific tradition that is the most accurate or most true, uh, and has some sort of meaning that is valuable to people? And if uh, Christianity has some aspect of that, which has led to a greater development of science over history. And I think one of the powerful aspects of Christianity is the idea of this sort of like Unitarian idea of general revelation, but that's also another debate.
Yeah. Um. Um. Yeah, like I said, I ran out of ideas a long time ago. If you have any questions, please ask them.
We should just have a guitar battle and then
I don't play bass though.
determine it by that.
Yeah, you have to play all originals though. You can't play any copyrighted music or tacos
I
will
do
get
have some
demonetized.
music
Don't
on
do it. Don't
Spotify.
do it.
Don't. I've written some songs. Yeah.
Uh, Funny enough, that was like my first out of high school. That's what I know this is completely not the debate topic. Sorry, chat, but out of high school, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a musician, and I'm not a musician now. Lo and behold.
You guys want to hit a couple super chats real quick?
Yes,
Sure.
that would help a lot.
Cool. All right. Steaming hot take says, Zach, so you just threw out everything you know about the world to believe in magic? The very foundation of your faith is unscientific fiction? Explain that.
It's just
Thank you, Steaming Hot Take.
Yeah, it's too much facts and logic for me. I don't know what to do there.
And then Oceanus says, we have hundreds of years of history where scriptures were not allowed in the hands of lay people. Science is shared in the exact opposite.
That's a pretty good point.
Is that true? So, wait, scriptures were not allowed in the hands of. I don't know that was strictly the case, right? Like,
I think he's
well, it was written in
that,
Latin. They did not. There weren't any English. It was what Tyndall was the first guy to try to create an English copy of the Bible, and that was.
I think he's trying to say it was an educated ruling class back then, and nowadays you can go and get a science kit and do like chemical reactions in your garage or on your. Don't do it on your dinner table. Do it in your garage, but yeah, I think that's all he's saying.
Yeah.
1526 was when the very first English Bible was ever made. So, yeah, I mean, it's like, why only in this language that only the academics can speak and read are we translating the Bible? That's a little bit conspiratorial. For me, it's like they did that too because secretly they changed it constantly and they just didn't want anybody else to read it because religion is all about control. I think that there is a truth as like the idea that religion is about control, I think is literally true, but I don't think that necessarily makes it nefarious.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that. Like there is a authoritarian normative, and I think that is actually probably one of the worst part of any religion is normative obligation. But that's not exclusive to Christianity, and that's actually not exclusive to religion. I don't want to get too controversial here, but like if you look at atheist countries that are explicitly atheist that take normative authoritarianism, they go on and commit the same atrocities that the religious political systems that mandated normative uh, uh, moral systems. They all kind of do the same thing when they say you have to do this or you're a bad person. So I think that's just bad for any moral system.
Gotcha. And then there's also a super chat from Oceanus again. And thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated. He says scientific discipline synergize with others. Christianity historically did not synergize with other religions to become a more advanced faith. In fact, they made other faiths go extinct. Thank you again, Oceanus. Greatly appreciated.
I'm not an expert on this, but from what I've heard, Catholicism did synergize with like pagan traditions. Again, not an expert on this history, but like I
Oh,
thought that
well,
a lot of holidays come from
it's
like pagan holidays and
no, that's kind of a myth. Actually, in my second book, Facts That Aren't True, which is right there, I talk about that. It's really not. There were some traditions that sort of became incorporated into Christianity, like decking the halls and Yuletide logs. Those aren't Christian things. Those were pagan things. But like the again, this is like the conspiracy aspect. Like the Catholics sat around and they just said, "Oh, to get more converts, we're gonna go out of our way to do all this adoption of all this pagan stuff." That didn't happen, and there's a ton of misinformation, like the stuff about Easter. Like, Beatty wrote that it originally was about this goddess Oster, and there's this month called Oster Month where they celebrated and blah blah blah. No historian has been able to find any evidence that that goddess even existed. Um,
hmm,
and so it's kind of like you know how in Chicago they have deep dish pizza. Did the mayor of Chicago invent deep dish pizza in order to attract Italian immigrants? Or did people who have had pizza before and happen to live in Chicago just kind of come up with their own version of it? That's what happened. Every
yeah.
single culture borrows and adopts things from their neighbors just naturally, and there's no conspiracy really going on. So there's as an atheist, there's quite a lot of misinformation about and with Christmas too, about how it was all like the idea that Christmas is on December 25th because that was the feast of Saturnalia or something like that. No, the reason it's on that date is because for whatever reason, there's this common ancient belief where important figures, people always said they were born and died on the same day for whatever reason, like they died on their birthday. That's just a common thing. Don't know why. But for Jesus, instead they say he died on the day he was conceived, and he was conceived in the springtime. Or no, hold on, I got this wrong. They say he was. Wait, shit. Now I'm getting my math mixed up. It's no, yeah, the day he was conceived is the day he died because he dies around Easter time, which is in the spring. Well, 9 months after Easter is roughly December 25th. Like they picked March 25th was the date they originally picked for when the Annunciation or whatever happened. And so 9 months after that is Christmas. So the whole thing about it does coincide with, a pagan holiday is just a coincidence. We can actually find the actual reason in this other thing.
Yeah, and actually, I can think of an instance in the New Testament where there's an attempt by Paul to synergize with the Greek Hellenistic idea of the unknown God, which is likely the Aristotelian prime mover. Interesting story to read about. But I'll respond to this guy steaming hot
Yeah,
take.
and so Seeming Hot Take says, don't hand wave my question away like you wave away reality. Respect the format and my support of Taco. Explain why you accept magic in your worldview.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Uh, I don't accept magic in my worldview. That's the answer to that. I'm a naturalist.
believe in the resurrection?
I believe that the people who were there, thought that it was a resurrection. It's hard to like have a scientific opinion on that, right? Because the data we have is not high quality in any sense. There was definitely a Jewish sectarian leader named Jesus, likely crucified. Uh, if he like, what does it mean for someone to be resurrected, right? Like people have had their heart stop for a second and then come back. I'm not trying to play this like, oh, like it's symbolic. I don't know what it means, but like
And point
the
of moderation, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but this is actually a really good topic. And since y'all are having a hard time trying to figure out where to go with that, that might be a good thing to focus on for actually a few minutes, like the miracle claims that are in the Bible in comparison with what we would expect from scientific claims, right? That might be a good, because that's the topic they
Yeah,
were
I mean,
going
I was
over
gonna press. I
anyways.
was gonna press him on it.
I like that one. Can't speak, then you worship the devil. Oh shit. No, it's like the you have to treat um, the literary analysis of the Bible like I would treat like I'm not just going to say that I think all of a sudden that uh, magic is confirmed because a book from 2,000 years ago said it was, or says that you should think that magic happens. Uh, there's a critical analysis by Hume that says the amount of data to confirm a miracle would be substantially more. I forget the exact words that he used, but he says the data required from any eyewitness evidence to confirm a miracle is insurmountable by the total sum of all of our experience with no miracles having occurred.
Yeah.
So my symbolic belief with regards to miracles is that I believe that uh, there's this sort of uh, like purpose in the reason that things happen. And so, like, if there is a low probability event, I don't. Have you ever played D&D? Uh,
No, no, I haven't.
in D&D, you roll dice, and like sometimes you can roll uh, like a really rare dice roll that you need, like right when you need it. You needed that D20, and you roll it, you get uh, a 5%, or like maybe two in a row, like 1 in 400 odds that it happens. And it's like, oh, that feels really powerful. I needed that right then. That was the low chance odds, and it happened. That's my take on miracles, is that they're low probability things happening when you need them to happen. Uh, I don't think that there is really I don't think it's consistent with an all-powerful, idea of God that he takes some action and not others, and so I can leave it open to more questioning if you want, but I think
So,
in
like,
my estimation, miracles are more symbolic. And there
I
is
mean, like,
this is
not to be that guy, but if you don't believe that Jesus resurrected and ascended into heaven, then I don't think you're really a Christian. Like, do you believe in Nicene Christianity?
I haven't read the Nicene Creed, so I couldn't say, and
Have you ever
resurrected
like
and
do you have a denomination?
Uh, I tend towards more formal like Methodism or Lutheranism, but I don't go to church really. No, I'm more just a theological thinker.
I mean, okay, because I mean, they you recite the Apostles' Creed at mass quite a lot. You probably actually are familiar with it. The Nicene Creed is the Apostles' Creed.
Yeah, I've been to mass like once or twice in my life.
Oh,
I'm
damn.
actually I am raised from like the evangelical uh, fundamentalist type Christianity, and I'm like assessing which claims I agree with and which ones that I don't agree with. And there is there's a lot of stuff that it seems like there's a lot more nuance. Like I feel like the general like you know both and and like some people in the comments here say like I agree with Zach. Jesus is fiction. It's like no, clearly Jesus wasn't fiction. This is exactly what I'm talking about here. Like it's
No, yeah,
not that.
I think he existed, but you're being a little bit Jordan Peterson-y. Like we don't know what you actually think. So
Well, I
like
think God exists.
are there any miracles that you think actually happened?
I think that Jesus is God is also, if you want to press me on that means.
Okay.
Uh, um, I think that I believe in the resurrection. Do I think it like does that mean there was a physical historical event where like 3 days later, as described, that magic powers were invoked and Jesus was raised from the dead? I don't have the right amount of data to
Well, I
say
mean,
that I
you
think
could
that
never have a
happened.
scientific explanation of it. You could witness a miracle, and you could like we could basically, as a society, if we all saw the same miracle or whatever, we could come to agree that this miracle really did happen. We would just never understand it. You know, it's like what I tell people is like, um, could we scientifically explain how magic works? Like, no, because it violates physics. Like if I say when Guardian Levio saw and I make the thing go up, there's no equation that will describe that. It blows up any kind of like you can't have a scientific explanation of it. So like, yeah, I don't maybe Jesus actually did resurrect or whatever. Um I
Yeah,
don't
so
believe that he did, but you know, we could you don't have to give a scientific defense of it. I wouldn't I would actually I would be more respectful if you just admitted that like I not 100% that I take it on faith cuz I like if somebody said, "Look, I view the gospels as being historical and I accept that this happened. I don't understand how it happened or whatever, but whatever." I would I would respect that way more than when people try to like scientifically say, "Oh yeah, I can scientifically prove that the Exodus happened or that the Jesus walked on water or that God did speak the world into existence or that he resurrected."
I would like to posit that there are fundamentally different types of miracles that we can classify, right? You have like the walking on water, or like there are miracles that it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. There's no naturalistic explanation. There's no way to say, oh yeah, there's a natural explanation. It's either some sort of story element or a historical asynchronicity. Something else is going on there. But then there are miracles that, like, I've had people in my life say, like, "Oh, I was healed in a miraculous way." It's like, well, there's actually a natural mechanism that goes along with that, and so I would say that it's still a miracle because it's a low probability event that happened when they needed it, like a someone overcoming cancer that nobody thought they would overcome. Uh, but I don't think it's like I don't think it's divine intervention. Um,
Right.
and there is it's not like I'm just talking out of my ass when I say that. There is a strong philosophical tradition of I don't know if you've ever read Kierkegaard. But Kierkegaard talks about how when we pray, it's not like we're praying to change God's mind. God is unchanging and uh, omnitemporal, you know, all the big three that people like to quote. If you pray, what you're doing is you are attempting to change your own mind by meditation. So I would say that, yeah, prayer is a useful thing for people to engage in, but it's not because, like, oh, you're going to convince God to go and act in divine intervention. It's more like prayer is a good thing to get your mind in the right headspace. That's I forget if that's 19th or 20th century, but that's Kierkegaard. And so, like, the naturalistic explanation within Christianity is not me just making this up right now to make myself feel more comfortable, or like the chat likes to say, cope. That's cute about D&D and God controlling the dice. It doesn't deal with childhood cancer or is
I was
comforting
going to wait a
in
little
many.
bit to read that, but we can read that now. Yeah, that's key about D&D and God controlling the dice. It doesn't deal with childhood cancer though, or is comforting in many childhood diseases. Thank you so much for the support, Oceanus. Greatly appreciated. You
Yeah.
feel free to address that if you want.
My sister had childhood cancer, and she passed away from that, and that is probably like between the debate of Christianity and and atheism. This is like one thing that I've isolated that it seems to be probably the most contentious part of the debate. There's some oral or there's some like tradition. The Russian writer Dostoevsky talks about this concept in his book, The Brothers Karamazov. Um, this is definitely the biggest divide, I think, between Christians and atheists, right? But the way that I see it is that in either situation, there is some psychological utility that is gained or lost by holding uh, one position over the other. If you believe that uh, the childhood cancer was God's divine plan, then obviously that's like, why the hell is God doing that? You have to subject yourself to some possibility that you don't know that's greater than yourself. But at the end of it, you have the possibility of saying, well, there may be an afterlife. I may see my sister again. So that's something that I want to believe in. On the side of atheism, you have like, oh, yeah, I don't have to feel angry at a uh, cosmic creator. You know, that it just happened. It's just a thing that happened. There's no meaning, no sense behind it. Uh, and that is a powerful psychological tool for people, but you don't have the delayed or you don't have the psychological way to deal with it to say that, oh, you might be able to see them again one day. So that's my take on that matter.
You remember what I was telling you earlier about when they interview athletes and they say, "Oh yeah, God was on our side" or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, this is so that's just an example of people not really uh, thinking too deeply about the way they view their relationship with God or whatever. And examples like this, I think, perfectly illustrate that as well. Like I understand that it's comforting and like that's maybe what gives it a lot of social utility, and maybe that's a naturalistic explanation of why religion is really popular. But I had a sister that died of cancer too. She was an older sister. And I remember I was still religious back when that happened. And I remember the funeral was in January in Nebraska, which is not a place you want to be in January. But somehow the day of the funeral, it was like 50 degrees and sunny. It was just this beautiful day. And I remember being so thankful to God that on this day where the family all came together to mourn and remember my sister, that he blessed us with such a beautiful day, which is insanely stupid because what I'm doing there is saying, wait a minute, God had the choice between either letting my sister die and orphaning her two kids or making this one day have nice weather. And he could have done the first thing, but chose to do the second thing. That's unthinkably stupid, but nobody thinks about it in those terms. There's this group for like progressive Christianity or something like that, and they talk about this kind of thing where it's like, well, look, you can't like in newspapers and on websites, you can't have like two headlines next to each other where it's like school shooting, terrible, all these people die or whatever, and then the next headline says something like child miraculously survives plane crash or something like that. Because what you're telling people is, yeah, God didn't save your kid. God saved this kid. You're not worthy.
Yep.
And yet people don't rationalize their relationship with God. They just ascribe causation because they believe religion is good. God is what good is. So when good things happen to me or when bad things happen to me, but there's a silver lining, God did that. Well, probably not, actually.
Yeah, and that is like the insensitivity that some religious people have when they uh, have these conversations, I think is like a little bit telling. Um, I think part of it is like a an optimism that people want to hold. The reason I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I do think the insensitivity is wrong, but I don't think it's wrong be to worship God or to call something a miracle when things go the way that you want them to go. Is because my general view is I don't think that I don't think there is a strong atheist argument that disproves the existence of God. We could talk about that a little bit if you want to. I don't take the existence of God as like a presupposition. There's a there's a Graham Oppie uh, interview with Alex O'Connor where they talk about how there's no like truly successful argument on either side to convince anyone beyond a shadow of doubt that either God exists or God doesn't exist.
Right.
My general view is that uh, the third option, you can't prove the existence of God or the non-existence of God. That's where I fall in the debate, and that it's an article of faith, whether you want to believe or disbelieve. I think it's better. I actually do think that it's better for some people not to believe, and I think it's better for other people to believe.
I mean, I'm agnostic. I don't think you can really prove God. I mean, but if there are logical contradictions, then I think you can, in that sense, prove that, well, this God doesn't exist, or a God like that can't exist. Because if you're going to tell me he's a square circle or a married bachelor, or he's all good but allows evil to exist, then yeah, that doesn't exist. But I don't know,
Right. Yeah.
some other kind of God that's, I don't know, like a purple hippo that created the universe and is
Spaghetti
just has
monster.
different qualities. Yeah, maybe that one exists. I want to go back a little bit to a super chat that was asked earlier because it's in the spirit of the debate. And we talked about it for a little bit, but then we got sidetracked. So it was the one that said, scientific disciplines synergize with others. Christianity historically did not synergize with other religions to become a more advanced faith. In fact, they made other faiths go extinct. So he started talking about Christianity adopting pagan religions and stuff like that. But I think this is actually a really good point because, yeah, science has a bunch of consiliency. The nuclear science or the physics or whatever works very well with the geology, which they both work extremely well with mathematics, and they all will tell the same story, like the age of the Earth or the shape of the Earth or planetary dynamics and motion and things like that. Now, sometimes there are kind of sort of like contradictions in science, like classical or gravity and quantum mechanics do not both work. In a certain sense, they both can't be true unless we find a gravity particle, and then we can marry them together. But even if we do find that gravity particle, literally Newtonian mechanics can't describe the motion of the electron. Quantum mechanics can, but quantum mechanics can't explain to you the motion of the moon around the Earth. But classical mechanics can do that. But what's different is with Christianity, and this is one of the things where I'm like, yeah, getting back to the thesis we're here to argue, Christianity just doesn't seem scientific at all to me, because it's like, can you imagine? So like the thing with like quantum mechanics and gravity not working well together. Well, scientists are annoyed and bothered by that, but it doesn't sow division and hatred. It actually unifies them in continuing to find whatever the answer is. But in Christianity, it's like, yeah, I mean, our interpretation of scripture is this, yours is that, we disagree, and they end up slaughtering each other by the tens of millions. Like, nobody's killed more Christians than Christians historically.
Yeah.
And it's because of the irreconcilable nature of, no, I declare that truth is like what my belief is. And it just doesn't, and also science doesn't, like general relativity was an overturning of an old paradigm. And like, I get what you were saying earlier about Christianity kind of sort of doing that, but Christianity has never went out to try to prove a pre-existing idea within Christianity false before. That's never happened.
I mean, I've done that, and I wouldn't say I am Christianity, right? But I
Well,
am a
yeah.
Christian, and I spend a lot of time in Blitz's Discord, and like when fundamentalists come on, or they'll like kind of make arguments that are really bad in favor of Christianity, I'll like tell them off and say like, no, your argument's bad. You shouldn't be doing that. I think that there have historically been people who do this. I think the Christians killing other Christians thing just, I think that's a problem with all normative obligation and saying like, if you don't do X, Y, Z, you are an immoral person. I think that should just be uh, watched out for, whether it's in, uh, socialist state sponsored ideology, or specifically communist, not socialist, or if it's a Christian theocracy, or if it's a Muslim imamate caliphate. I just think that's terrible across the board. Um, I do think that there is some sense, though, that Christianity is not necessarily at odds with like other religions or theological descriptions of the universe in general, though. This kind of goes back to the story I was talking about in Acts earlier. And it's this theology of general revelation, which is not accepted by like your average evangelical or conservative Christian. Uh, but um, the idea is, right, that our human descriptions, like the way that we try and describe God, these are all uh, interpretive, and they map onto what we're trying to describe. And it's not that we like that divine command was given to us in an explicit decree or specific way. And so, in some way, shape, or form, when someone figures out how to be a good person, or like if I uh, this is also a classic objection to Christianity. It's like, oh, what about the random dude who's living on an island who's never heard about Christ before? That guy's just out, so doesn't get to go to heaven because he's never heard the name of Christ. Well, it's like, well, you can hear about the specific historical instantiation of Christ, but you can also learn about Christ likeness. Right? It says Christ says that He is the way, the truth, and the life, and so this idea of general revelation is the idea that if you come to know truth, if you come to make yourself a better person, uh, that you know Christ the natural and not Christ the specific, and so that you have your pathway to heaven through those means. Uh, and I think the first formalization of this idea was with Roger Bacon in the 17th century. 17, I think that sounds right.
Roger
Uh,
Bacon? Roger Bacon was like the 1300s.
Francis Bacon, then Francis Bacon.
Francis Bacon was 1500s.
And just over 2 minutes remaining.
Uh, but I think that Christianity is not as opposed to unification as some people may have experienced uh, from evangelicals, whose like their specific goal is to get you to buy into their normative means of obligation, where they will have some sort of authoritarian control over you. There's a lot of those people out there, but I don't think that that is the uh, truest instantiation of methodological Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, Catholics used to believe that if you're not a Catholic, you go to hell, but then they came out with Vatican II. It's hilarious that it's actually called that. Where after the horrors of the Holocaust, they were like, we don't want to be associated with that kind of thing. So now we think that anybody can go to heaven, but you should still be Catholic anyways. And then they changed some other things too.
Yeah, and according to biblical literature, that is in their right. It says they hold the keys to the gates of heaven. So, if you want to continue in the progressive tradition of Christianity, you got to do some theory revision when anomalous data uh, is not when you can't account for anomalous data. And I think they did the right thing by that. I think that the idea of general revelation is the more holistic and uh, impactful and valuable belief set to hold for people's lives and more in line with the teachings of Christ. Excuse me. But I appreciated this conversation. I feel like we had a good conversation.
Yeah, it was good.
15 seconds. Are y'all done here? We can go ahead and move into the closings if y'all want.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounded like y'all were pretty much done there. Cool. I'm gonna touch on a couple quick super chats. These were the $2 ones. You don't have to respond to these if you don't want to, but if you do, just be kind of quick with them because there's a lot of them. Robin asked, "Do you think Christianity has utility of false?" Not sure which one of y'all that's for, but do a quick response if you want to respond.
I mean, it would have a utility. Whether that utility is good or not is subject to debate.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely could. I mean, like I said this earlier, but the value of money is not true. It's completely made up. But it's very has a lot of utility. Or like certain ideas, like you should always treat a gun like it's loaded. Well, if it's not, you're still better off if you always pretend it is, because you'll be like more safe. And so, yeah, to the extent that religions maybe came up with like ritualistic ideas and taboos that maybe have a truth element, but the way they're espoused or grounded is false. Yeah, it actually can be beneficial. Even like Richard Dawkins thinks there's like an evolutionary reason for religion.
And then Benjamin Horwitz says, "Zach, explain incommensurability."
I don't know. What are we doing here? Just
you don't have to respond. Okay. And thank you so much. I do appreciate the super chat. And then Tagaxon1 says, "Christianity is a coping mechanism. Love you, PP." There were a bunch of PP fans in the audience tonight. Skeptic philosophy. Good to see you, dude. Was Luke's lineage back to Adam allegorical or literal?
Probably just wrong.
Gotcha. And then Robin says, "My vote goes for germ theory." That was something that was said earlier.
Oh, that was Robin, the greatest idea in the history of science.
Right. And then Robin says, "Religion, our first attempt at understanding nature." That's probably a pretty good point. Greatly appreciate it. Nobody on fire. Zach and PP both chill dudes. Insert chill dude meme. Yep. I knew they would have a good conversation. They're both nice guys. And then Robin says, 1408 law criminalized translating Bible to English. Interesting. That's a good tidbit of information right there.
It's sort of, it's not exactly true. It just banned unapproved translations and possession of them, but not because they didn't want people reading the Bible. I think they just, for whatever reason, had this idea that Latin as a Romance language was just like, they just kind of thought it was heretical to write the words of Scripture in English, not because they didn't want people to read it, just for a different reason.
Yeah, and like I said, within this debate, I've said it a few times. There's a lot of things that Christians have done that are pretty messed up, like the Crusades, the Inquisition, the 30 Years' War. I could probably like go on a long list. I'm not gonna try and like be a history revisionist here. Like, there's messed up things within Christianity for sure. I don't think that is the defining part of Christianity, though. Is like, just because bad stuff happened doesn't mean that's only bad stuff happened, right?
All right. So I got the vote set up for the audience. I got Big PP and Zach Z set up on the vote for tonight's master debater. So let's go ahead. Well, not at this exact moments, but they're going to be doing their closings here in a second. So as they're doing their closings, once you make your decisions, go ahead and start placing your votes. Zach, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 8 minutes.
I'm not ready at all, but let's do this thing.
All right. You've got 8 minutes.
Yeah, so I didn't prepare a closing here, but what is very important for you to think about when you're voting is, right, I think that the methodologies, the historical and rational tradition of Christianity is inherently scientific. I think evidence of that is that if we look at the cultural evolution or the scientific evolution of society as a whole, we see that uh, the religious institutions precede the theophilosophical, and the theophilosophical precedes the scientific. So even if you don't think that it's fully scientific, if you think it's on the spectrum of scientism, I feel like certainly the methodologies employed, the expert peer review, the paradigm refinement, theory revision, I feel like all of that is evidence of a scientific tradition. And so I guess I'll just repeat what I said at the beginning. The claim is not that Christianity is a laboratory science like I have conducted in a nuclear laboratory. Obviously, we're not creating or controlling experiments on physical systems. Genesis did not predict the Big Bang. We're not transmuted into flesh by some sort of magic. There is nuance and symbolism within these old subjects, and you have to understand it within the genre and the tradition as it has been presented over time. And I'm not claiming that all Christians reason scientifically. No discipline is defined by the behavior of a single one of its practitioners. The existence of bad scientists does not falsify science. Likewise, the existence of anti intellectual Christians does not falsify Christianity's historical methodological structure. And I know inevitably I am probably going to get voted as the loser in this debate just by the nature of the forum. Unfortunately, I will not take the
Don't poison
master.
the well on yourself. Don't do that.
Sorry. All I want,
Positivity.
all I want, is to be the master debater. But I think it's important, no matter what, for people to remember that just in general going forward, that we shouldn't encourage Christians to not move the goalposts. If you tell Christians that they can't revise their interpretations, you are implicitly validating the type of Christianity that has most harmed our society. So I think everybody here should be very much on board with a version of Christianity that is progressive and pushes forward, even if that may be counterintuitive or seem like moving the goalposts. I cede my time. Thank you for the debate.
Thank you for the great closing. And Eric, let me know when you're ready and I'll start your timer.
Yeah, I'm ready.
And also, real fast, get those votes in. There's only 20 something votes, people. All right, you got 8 minutes.
I'd voted for you, Zach, by the way. Just as a gesture of good faith. So obviously, the belief in the doctrines of Christianity, I don't think anybody, including Zach, could make a defense that that even is scientific or anything like that. So the argument that was pushed for was something sort of like the cultural practice of Christianity mirrors the cultural practice of science, and kind of sort of in a way also like the scientific method. So I disagree with that. I don't think it's scientific. I think that Christianity's, like, if ever it was, reinterpreted, I think that was always in the light of new information, like abandoning geocentrism over heliocentrism, or new interpretations. But those are both examples of post hoc. It doesn't subject its beliefs to tests which are carried out, and false beliefs are not readily thrown out when they don't ring true, which is the way that science works. Instead, these post hoc beliefs that are come up with, they're held on to the death, and sometimes they're imposed on others under the threat of death and coercion, and lots of other things. So that's my argument. That's my closing statement.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for the closings, y'all. Let's see how many. And I did put the link in chat for people to join the open panel. I'll do it again right now, but if you would like to engage with our guests, we have two wonderful guests here, Zach and Planet Peterson. Both have been very gracious to give us their time tonight. Have a wonderful conversation. That was actually a really good. Some of these mega bloodbaths are like.
Get a free book, 2 free audiobooks, and ad-free videos by becoming a Patreon member.